Wellbeing shoe, the wellbeing shoe, or maybe it's a glove. Who knows? It could be some piece of clothing. Probably isn't. It probably is a show. And welcome to the Wellbeing Show. Sorry I missed you all last week. We had to repeat a show due to circumstances beyond our control, as the BBC used to say. I can't do a BBC voice, so maybe one of these two chaps can. We've got some great guests on, returning guests, foolish enough to return. They sort of weren't put off the first time. And I've actually seen them in between the shows as well. They did real work for me. So they're absolute mugs, if you ask me, sort of, with me far too often. So Yossi and Tyler have joined us from Write2Speak, and they'll be talking about that. And we'll have a look at the BNF formula that's behind Yossi as well. So we can just check out any contraindications with medication. But just to say this evening, we're having technical problems, so we can't take any calls. So that's just the way it is. I know you're all devastated, but I'm sure you'll still enjoy the show, and do drop out comments in the various platforms we're streaming on. We're on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook currently, and sort of the world domination plan is ongoing. And don't know what platforms. Truth Social. No, let's not go there. I don't think we got that one. You could just imagine, can't you? So anyway, enough of that dribble. Welcome back, Tyler and Yossi. So good to have you back. How are you doing?
Well, thank you. It's good to be back.
Thanks for yeah, we're doing well. Can't complain, can we?
We
do, but no one listens. Sometimes we listen to each other.
That's it. Yeah,
we listen to each other complain. That's what friends are for, right?
Yeah, well, nobody else is listening to you, so why not? So we're here to talk about you guys and Write2Speak and catch up with what you've been doing. So Write2Speak is?
We are a spoken word poetry organisation. So we work in a few different ways. We work with the community, with young people and adults, delivering spoken word workshops, where we support people to express themselves in an artistic way. And then we also run events. So currently we run a regular monthly event in North London, which is an open mic event where we also have feature artists come down, and we're creating a lovely intergenerational community through that. And then we work in a few other ways as well, through film, and mainly working with different groups of people, supporting them to express themselves and connect and foster conversations and support the creation of art.
So is spoken word a term for something then? Is that a thing?
Well, generally perceived, spoken word is a type of poetry, a genre of performance poetry. But the way we explain it and how we practice it at Write2Speak is we tell people that spoken word can be anything. And we really don't keep it to the traditional image you might imagine of poetry that's taught in school. We try and show people that spoken word can be anything. It's just a way of expressing yourself and using your voice. And we teach people that they can do that in whatever way is comfortable for them. So people do spoken word in a plethora of ways.
Is the performance thing quite important? Is that the history of this art genre?
Well, it's our background, so it definitely is a part of it. However, we're not necessarily trying to make any of the participants of our workshops performers by any means. That can sometimes be quite daunting to have that as the baseline of coming into a session. However, if we feel like it's right, we coach our participants in how to make their spoken word more engaging.
Yeah, I guess it depends what level they're at. So in a one-off workshop with a new group of young people, that session might simply be about giving them a couple of spoken words to write and trying to use that to give them some confidence and get them speaking to each other and get them feeling like their voice is valued. Whereas if we're working with a group of young people for 10 sessions over 10 weeks, for example, during that course, we'll explore writing and performance and discussion and all the elements of spoken word. And by the end of most programs like that, we put on a performance with the participants. And by that point, they definitely are performance level. And some of our ex-participants have gone on to start performing and doing really well in the spoken word community.
I mean, although like yesterday, we done a one-off workshop, and even within that, there were a few of the participants in that workshop who needed a little bit of guidance on how to perform their pieces a little bit better. And so we gave them that. We had, I guess it was like a 2-on-2 as opposed to like a 1-on-1. We had a couple of participants with us and who we were just coaching through how to make their pieces more fluid, more engaging.
So is it, I'm just, because I'm an old fogey and I'm not up to with these modern thingies that you're talking about, but I remember a thing called poetry slam.
Yes.
It was a form of performance poetry. And
yeah, people kind of put those two in the same category. And it can be, depends on the type of spoken word that you create.
I think the words are used interchangeably. I think in America they call it slam poetry a little bit more, and some places here call it slam poetry, but generally the term I think that's growing is spoken word.
Because it's so much more accessible when you call it spoken word, I think.
Yeah. So
a difference.
But 1 second, we'll put aside the fact that you want to reassure people that you're not just going to throw them on stage and terrify them. I get that. We'll talk about the ins and outs of how you actually run workshops and build things. But I'm interested in maybe just exploring a little bit more about this art form, because again, I remember like this is a long time ago. It was a little baby pterodactyl at university undergraduate, and Gil Scott Heron came to play, and it seems to me, and I might be wrong, but there's a connection between that type of rap that he was doing and the music he was doing, and then the poetry slam movement and the spoken word. Does that resonate? Do you think that is connected? Yeah,
there's a fine line between all of the audible art forms.
I think what's really interesting about spoken word at the moment is, well, one, it's a currently evolving art form. And it's changing all the time, and it's not that well known, and the community where it is known is kind of growing and thriving. I think it came from it's protest art in a way, or it came from protest art. People like Gil Scott Heron and Benjamin Zephaniah and those types of writers who were doing
poor Benjamin. He went not long ago, wasn't it? He said goodbye to us, Benjamin.
Beg your pardon?
Benjamin, did you not hear this year Benjamin went?
Zephaniah passed away.
I feel like that. I feel like that kind of came in and left again. I feel like I
sure it was Benjamin Zephaniah. I'm sure Benjamin died.
Zephaniah passed away.
I feel like I thought that was a hoax.
I had no idea. I saw him healthy and well and performing a year ago.
Wow.
Yeah, let me just. I could be wrong. Benjamin.
It's a very sad way to start the show. That's blimey, not something I want to hear on camera.
Yeah, 2000. Hang on.
Benjamin Zephaniah.
Is this? Or maybe I got it wrong.
Unless
I'm still alive. Oh, James is telling me he's still alive. Who was that?
I feel like that wrong. Thank God.
I feel like I heard something like that, but I feel like it was definitely hoax material.
It wasn't Benjamin. Maybe it was somebody else.
It was somebody else.
Okay, great.
Anyway, but yeah. I think the art form of spoken word, it definitely came from performance poetry and slam poetry, but it always had that feeling of protest and rebellion art. And what's interesting about the way it's evolving now is that it's become rebellion art, but for every one of these different groups that are evolving in our culture. So you've got kind of the Black Centre community, the LGBT community, the inclusive sort of disability community and people who identify like that. And there's all these different communities that sort of have found their way into the spoken word community. And because it's a way that everyone can express themselves and they're heard and they're welcomed, whoever they are. And a lot of people, it is about talking about the challenges they're facing. Another massive part of that community is mental health. It's a big topic within spoken word.
I think, like, you know, the fine line that I was speaking about, I feel like spoken word is like a subcategory of rap, in the sense that rap was used to feel out and express one's pain, to do with one situation, and spoken word is the same thing, it's just done slightly differently.
But the beauty of spoken word is that it isn't just that. There's also some incredible comedic spoken word, and so it isn't just stuck to being serious.
Pain is laughter as well, if they say so.
And laughter is healing.
And so yeah, the fine line continues.
Yeah, but it sounds like it's the point of it is that it's very accessible as an art form.
Exactly. That's what. Well, it can be.
I'd say it has multiple points as an art form. I would say the way we deliver it in an educational setting and in a community setting is very much about that. But then on the other side of things, to make an art form, there needs to be a certain level of excellence and a certain people. You need a bit of competitiveness and people trying to create the best art that they can. Otherwise, you lose the quality of the art. And so I think it has value in both settings. It has value as something purely about accessibility and everyone being able to express, which they can, but also we need to not forget about the quality of the art that we're making and the fact that, you know, it's subjective, but then there's art that excels and stands out and inspires and is spiritual and has love and depth to it. And then there's art that's a bit more surface level as well.
For me, spoken word is like the classy version of karaoke. That's just something that's just come to mind. It's like it's, you know, it's performance for people who don't usually perform, but it gives them that stage and that platform to be able to do so and be listened to and heard.
I think what's so interesting about it, even in like all different settings, because we run this monthly event where we're sort of building up this community, and they're people who've been coming kind of regularly. They know a bit about spoken word, or they've searched it out to go to a spoken word event. And then we do things like what we were at yesterday. We were delivering a workshop for Plan International UK as part of one of their projects, supporting mostly young women who face certain challenges in Wales, that they've brought over to London for this day to celebrate this project. And these young people, after an hour's workshop, about 5 or 10 of these young women performed these incredible pieces that they'd written to a big conference room full of professional adults and some high-powered people. And it was quite an intimidating space to be in. And these young people performed incredible poems after such a short time. And the atmosphere in the room that was created was this one of safety to communicate and of mutual understanding and connection, and the fact that a lot of these young women, and there were maybe 100 people at this event or 200, and a lot of them were young women who all shared these same problems and these same fears that they were speaking about, to do with harassment and sexual assault and kind of the areas that they lived in. And it created that connection and community and the space for those conversations. And the same thing happens at our event when adults come together and share the challenges they're facing.
So there's something interesting for me about that, in terms of thinking about this performance element, and how teaching people those types of skills might enable them to do something different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. One of the things that we like to lightly drill home in our workshops is that we're not trying to make anybody spoken word poets. However, if we can give them spoken word as a tool to be able to express themselves in a better way throughout their life, like it's a life skill, being able to write and express yourself in a certain way and communicate with other people in an articulate manner.
But I'm particularly thinking about these young women who clearly are not high-powered business people.
It's incredibly valuable.
You know what I mean? And in normal course of events, you ask them to say something to that type of audience, and they're just going to be flummoxed. They won't be able to.
And
it's because
particularly sort of serious issues that affect them and traumatize them and upset them, right?
I think it's sorry to prematurely cut you. I think it's the environment that we create in the workshop first of all, because if you just ask somebody to get up on stage and speak about all of their issues, you're probably going to get a closed mouth. However, it's the environment that is created by all of the participants as well in the workshop, the really open, loving space that we fostered. It allows them the opportunity to be like, do you know what, I am going to get up on stage and tell people that, because everybody else I've got the support of everybody else in this room that's going to be out there watching me as well. And
we use the art of facilitation, as someone interviewing us described it the other day, and it is an art form to facilitating, and you don't push anyone into doing anything. You don't really even ask anyone particularly. You sort of you offer it and you start gently, and you start with some fun, and you demonstrate the thing that you're offering as well. And you say, hey, this is what we're doing. Does anyone want to have a go? And you tell them why it might be worth having a go.
And we draw the relation, that fine line between rap and singing and music, and it makes it make a bit more sense.
And we give them a few possibilities, and then we give them autonomy by saying, you know, this is just about you, and there's no wrong and right. You just express on whatever topic you want. But to give credit to these young women in particular, they were already part of this project by Plan UK, in which they were setting up their own local campaigns to tackle issues within their area, and they'd had some funding to run these smaller campaigns. So this day we were involved in was kind of the evaluation and celebration day for that project. And so these young people have been involved in a bit of public speaking activity already, and they're already doing amazing things within their own community for young people of that age. But to equip them with the skill of spoken word and those extra performance and public speaking skills like we did yesterday was it definitely added a big level to their performance, and it was seen when they shared. It was it was beautiful. The audience were very receptive, and they did perform at a higher level to the other young people who were just speaking about their project. You could literally see how, I mean, I saw you doing a certain exercise with that young lady. Tyler had this young woman who was quite anxious to do this, walking around the room, and eventually through doing a bit of breath work and some kind of calm atmosphere, she had got the confidence.
She had I don't want to use the wrong words here. speech impediment. Would that be the right way
She
to
had a
say it?
stutter.
She had a stutter, and I noticed quite quickly that when she moved her body while she was speaking, it slowed the stutter right down. It almost disappeared completely.
Yeah, I know, I get that. I used to have a stutter. I managed it through learning how to do theatre.
There we go. Exactly. Just being able to focus your energy in a specific place. Going too deep into that, but yeah, point being is that it's that thing about like being seen and understood. And no, we don't understand everybody's trials and tribulations, but we can certainly be open to them, and that's something that we've been able to do. And
surprisingly often people do understand each other's challenges and trials, and that
they try anyway, and that's
actually, you know, I think goodwill exists in many places that we don't expect to find it, to be honest. I really do. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on, you know, in the media and social media that creates this sense of which we're at each other's throats, and we're not. You know, and I think a good example of it was when the pandemic came. We didn't start eating each other. We started helping each other, right?
But the news can show a small selection of terrible incidents, and without showing any contrast, make us all feel like the world's this terrible place where there's all this terrible stuff happening. But actually, if you were to look at the number of people who had a perfectly normal day and had perfectly nice relations with everyone they bumped into, you know, the percentage of these terrible incidents, I hope, is quite small.
I feel like that social media has done a great job, though, at facilitating
extremism,
facilitating a space where it is cool to have beef with other people and to be at war with other people. And yeah, you know, you'll see YouTubers that are actively engaging in reaction videos where they're dissing one another, and for some reason it does create a buzz, but again, not with everybody. And so yeah, I feel like once you step out of that and you step into the real world a little bit more, and if you're open enough yourself to, you know, start conversations with people on the street and stuff like that, you notice that.
I think like social media is interesting as a space, and we're going slightly off topic, but let's stay with it, because one of the things that we don't know the rules properly. We know the rules of communication in other areas, and thinking about this is what you two do really well, is help people communicate. And it's clearly both very skilled about it yourselves. I mean, you're great communicators, but social media platforms often aren't facilitators of communication. They seem to be facilitators of discord and division as opposed to communication.
And they are also the guardians of that censorship. So they are making up the rules as what's allowed and what isn't as they go along.
And it's still social media is still very new. Communication has been around for as long as people.
I think that's right.
So social media and all the tech, all of those, I mean, let's say social media as a whole and all the apps that come with a modern smartphone, that is an experiment that has just been rolled out on 6 billion people without anyone's consent.
Sort of overnight.
Experiment that is damaging the population in countless ways that we aren't even aware of yet, I think, and is going to have a profound effect on what it is to be a human and communicate and have relationships for
I mean, I have to say I'm a great fan of the online world. I mean, we're on it now. And you know, without this stuff, the pandemic and the lockdown would have been horrific,
and we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Exactly. And so I'm not dissing the platforms. I think there's a long way to go in terms of learning it. So one of the things I do when I have my social media platforms, and I do for my company, is I manage the content. And if I see any antisocial behavior, I kick it off. And these days, I don't really spend a lot of time trying to negotiate with people who troll or are antisocial. I just block them.
When you've got to do that for the however many billion users of the platform, how on earth do you do that?
Well,
AI.
Well, yes and no. There are certain countries, namely China, they are policing social media and making sure that certain things aren't slipping through the filter, so that
we're going to get cut off YouTube.
I mean, I think it's an interesting conversation because there's the online safety bill in the UK Parliament at the moment, and it's created a lot of debate about freedom of speech versus. I mean, it's all nonsense.
It's a lot.
And then it gets more complicated when you consider that children have access to everything.
But
that's the point, isn't it? That I mean, I think social media is good, and I think communication in those spaces is valuable, but it has dangers. We need to recognize the dangers. And in the same way that, it's the same argument about cars, for example. There are dangers with them, so we regulate them.
Yeah.
You have to wear a safety belt. You have to drive in certain ways, obeying rules and regulations that we've invented to make it safe, etc., etc., etc. And so I think there's a reasonable argument to say that there should be some control of that. So nobody would argue these days, apart from somebody who's very damaged and dangerous, that pornographic images of children should be allowed on the internet. Of course they shouldn't. It's awful.
You'd think.
And so there are these things that, when we start to have the conversation, we go, yes, of course, that's right. We should be monitoring this. And it is, I think, coming back to your point, Tyler, there's been this experiment with this thing where there have been no rules or regulations upon it. And somehow we've listened to that strange argument about freedom. Well,
yeah.
It's really not like that, is it? Do you know what I mean? Life.
Sometimes, most of the time, too much of anything is bad, and especially when we haven't figured out the way to do it right yet. And so there's everyone has a voice now. Everyone has a voice, and whilst yes, freedom of speech is great, some certain voices, obviously the more negative voices, maybe need quieting a little bit, and it's
we have to stop hate, because hate leads to somebody being damaged.
Maybe you need to change it by education rather than by just shutting them up.
There's a level of understanding that needs to be had with the people who are hateful about why they're hateful.
And it all comes back to education and educating young people in respect, and educating people in parenting, so that young people are educated at home in respect. And
I feel like just to like come back around to workshops, it's a discussion that we have where
it must be absolutely.
We do what we do in the setting that we do it in, but then young people still have to go back out into the world and into their homes where there may be some discourse, and we there's nothing we can do about that apart from be that open space and give them the tool of writing, so that on their bad days or their good days they can get out of their heads, articulate it on paper, and move on with their days.
It's great that what we offer is kind of a good early intervention or prevention for sort of worsening of mental health. But there really is an epidemic of mental illness among young people, and whether that is an epidemic of genuine mental illness or that may be combined with feeling a lot of emotion and feeling nervous and feeling anxiety and kind of being led into thinking, self-diagnosing, maybe I have this because I'm feeling like this, and not understanding that we all go through kind of varied emotion. But we're doing so many workshops as of late with groups of children in primary school and secondary school age, where the majority of the people in the room have self-described anxiety and a fear of just speaking to the room. And it does drastically change over a course of 5 or 10 workshops, even sometimes during 1 or 2 workshops. But the fact that so many young people are coming in with this heavy weight on their shoulders, and that, I mean, in this project we're doing with a girls' secondary school currently, we're 2 workshops into a course of 10 workshops with 15 and 16-year-old young women, and they all come into this room and they're very, very shy and sort of nervous to speak. And then as soon as they start writing, the stuff they come out with is incredible, and they're writing these poems about how they feel lost and they struggle with the contradicting voices in their head and imagery and social media, and they're saying these poems, and suddenly they're all looking at each other and going, "Oh, me too, what? You too," and it's really powerful to see the benefit that what we offer can have, but also it's terribly upsetting to see the state that a lot.
It's interesting because what it sounds like is that the art form, for want of a better way of describing it, somehow allows for this communication to happen that otherwise would be unspoken. People wouldn't be able to voice it. Does that sound right?
Yeah,
100%. And I think it works in a number of different ways. I think it's because the way we facilitate and the art of spoken word and the way we offer it to people works on different levels, and we try and find something for everyone in that. And it's the environment we create and the structure of the workshops that we build up to it very gradually, make sure everyone's feeling comfortable. And also when we're working, we're very observant and we're very aware of every single individual in the room, and we are reading every single individual's energy to give them the support they need as an individual as well as collective support.
I think again comes back to the earlier conversation about the lack of, for want of a better word, moderation amongst some of these online spaces, because you there as human beings, you have a set of values and beliefs and you're facilitating those values and beliefs, right? I guess.
Yeah.
You're right to say it's not just, you're not robots who just write a poem and then talk about how shitty you feel.
We can't even deny that we're teaching them our opinions on how we feel the world should be and how we feel as young people they should kind of, but we do it in the most open way we can. But you know, we think that everyone should treat each other respectfully and listen to each other.
And again, things that technically, you know, like you also said, no, that go without saying, but actually sometimes they need reiterating because
you have to say them. You can't assume them. I was interested because I was talking to James just before the show started. I do some radio interviews and stuff like that. And one of the people I've been interviewed quite a lot is a guy called Nick Ferrari on LBC, who we don't share the same views on the world at all.
I know that name.
Like politically, we're very different, but there's something about him that I feel when we talk, we share a lot of common humanity. And and just from having listened to him in other places, his values are definitely closely aligned to me, even though we have like diametrically opposed opinions on politics, without a doubt. But there's I don't have a doubt with the guy that he's just a decent human being.
And I guess there's no hatred in
no, not at all.
And again, I feel like and not exclusive to, but I think it amplifies it. You know, again, the use of social media, it amplifies this. Oh well, if we're different, then you shouldn't exist, or there should be some sort of conflict. It's like, how about people just have conversations? I mean, there are some fantastic YouTube channels who do foster open conversation. And
on one right now, folks, go and check out my channel. It's all about open conversation.
There you go. It's just you know, talking, and just because you disagree doesn't mean that you have to.
But it's that, do you know that cricketing term? You play the ball, not the man. It's a very sort of gender specific term, but it's an old term. And the idea is that you can be opponent to somebody and want to beat them, but not beat them as a human being.
Beat them at the game you're playing.
Beat them at the game that you're playing.
And that's where conversation is really important, because it's okay to have different opinions to someone. And we always tell people this in the workshop. We start our workshop sometimes with questions like...
Riley, you'd heard of that saying, hadn't you? Play the ball, not the man. Yeah.
I maybe have heard it.
A variation of, and I was going to say, don't worry about the gender.
I'm just saying that because I said it to James again before the show, and he just looked at me blankly. Went, what?
It sounded familiar.
It just made me feel really old. I'm glad to know you two are kind enough not to make me feel old. I know I'm old.
We'll pretend we understand it. But no, we make it very clear that it's okay to have different opinions. We all have different opinions,
right. And we show them that as well in our workshops. We don't agree on everything. We're best mates and business partners and co-facilitators, and we don't always agree on the same things. And sometimes we let the young people know that, and we don't argue about it in front of them, but you know, we have that conversation.
And we'll say, you know, Tyler sees spoken word like this, and sometimes Tyler does this, and whereas sometimes I think about this. What do you think? Because we all have our different opinions, and we say to people as well, part of the beauty of spoken word, and one thing we use to reassure people that they are good enough to do it, because people often go, oh, I can't write a poem, I'm rubbish at writing, I'm rubbish at English. We say, listen, everyone's mind is different and unique, and so whatever you write will be different,
unique to you,
to what anyone else will think.
And so long as you can speak and write, and maybe not even write, or maybe not even speak, maybe it's a combination.
You could write for people, couldn't you? Doesn't mean
spoken word. It's, you know,
think of a thought.
There's something interesting as well about taking stuff in here and putting it out there, and how it might change in that process.
Yep.
Yeah. Does that resonate with you?
Yes. And it's funny you even say that. Sometimes, so I find this, I don't know if, I'm sure you do. Sometimes I will write something with the exact emotion that it came through my body with, but then when you perform it, it doesn't quite have the same feeling because you're in a different time. And so it doesn't always translate. However, there's one specific young lady in the workshops that we're doing in Essex, And nearly every time she reads, the emotion is right at the forefront of her pieces, and it's really beautiful to see.
Yeah, good performer.
She's not trying to hold it back; it just comes out. And we were trying to figure out. We were like, is she
a good performer, or is she just really emotional?
Is she just really in touch with her feelings? Yeah, and I think it's the latter. She needs to open up and say some stuff, and it's really beautiful to be able to see that conversion.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that happens to me, and this is not the same thing that you talk about, but it's just thinking about that, how stuff changes from inside to outside, particularly when we share it with people. So sometimes, like, because I'm a really grumpy old bloke as well, because I often be having really angry thoughts in my head, right? And then somebody go, "What's wrong with you?" And then I start to explain it to them, and I go, "Oh, it's quite stupid, really. Maybe I'm not that angry after all." And something happens just by communicating it to somebody that somehow it just gets processed away, and I'm no longer that ball of sort of knotted angry energy. And and usually I'm just feeling a bit stupid and embarrassed. But that's probably better than being furious.
That can even work, just writing it down.
Before you need to have maybe a heated discussion with somebody. Maybe write it down and articulate yourself a little bit better before you do so, and that conversation might, if you're lucky, go a little bit better. Yeah.
I mean, if that's a great skill to offer somebody. Like if they're going to have a difficult conversation with, say, an authority figure, their boss, their teacher, their parent, and it's a difficult subject, like writing it down and rehearsing it, getting rid of those excess emotional stuff and being able to communicate it much more clearly. I mean, it's a great skill, I think.
And
both of you are quite, like, the energy that you have for it, it's natural energy anyway. But there's also, it seems to me that you're very committed to this, and I'm presuming because you know personally how transformative and helpful this stuff is. Is that right? Am I guessing right?
It's funny. I was to draw on what you were just speaking about before. I was that kid who would come home and write a letter to whichever teacher pissed me off that day, and and often give it to them as well.
And then be suspended for 2 days.
I was going to say, my advice is, folks, don't send that letter, don't send the email, write it, but don't press the send button.
If they suspended me in reception or year 1 or year 2, it would have been a little bit crazy. But yeah, there was something in it. I mean, my mum, she finds these letters sometimes and gives them to me. She's roaring in laughter at how I was trying to articulate myself at these ages. But yes, we have both experienced the need to be able to speak our.
Do you mind talking about that a bit? Your experiences, is that okay?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, for me, I always wrote a lot growing up in school. I was often in isolation and detention, and I always wrote rap because that was the art I really resonated with. But I was never very good at it, and no one ever sort of listened to what I had to rap. And I was a little white kid with a lisp, so it wasn't really happening for me at the time. But eventually I found the art form of spoken word, and for me it did change my life. Like, there's no two ways of saying it. It changed my life. I went from being sort of an out of work actor, doing other jobs and sometimes working as an actor, to finding this art form, and in a space of months realizing that there was kind of an art form that I until this point wasn't aware of, that I wanted to build a career in. And I suddenly found, like, I suddenly felt appreciated for my lyrics, which is what I always wanted as a kid growing up, and I never found a space to do that. And when I started performing spoken word, I felt accepted and appreciated for what I had to say. And doing it in an artistic setting just makes it all more exciting.
And what was the stuff at school? Why all these detentions and things like that?
Because I was very talkative, and I was the kind of young person that we encourage young people to be now in our workshops, the kind of person who sticks up for themselves and doesn't, if a teacher says, "Oh, be quiet," I would respond with, "Actually, I was talking about something worthwhile," or, "Why are you looking out the window?" "I'm thinking."
Well, they got smart ass.
Right. I was a smart ass. I chatted back to the staff, but I also stood up for what I believed in and what I saw was fair and what I saw was unfair. And, you don't get very far doing that in most state schools. Hence often being isolation.
Yeah, similarly.
But
was that similar for you? Yeah,
very, very much so. Like I say, I was always having some sort of altercation with the teacher who just wanted to shut me down. And actually, often it was just me asking questions, trying to understand what was happening and the whys. And that wasn't, that doesn't fit the curriculum, does it? They've only got a half hour to teach a lesson. So, so for me, I grew up more with a dance background, and so I learned to express myself through movement.
Did you? Right.
And yeah, just expressing my frustrations through dance, really. However, although I had, you know, the letter writing side of me as a kid, I would say I kind of lost that a bit as I moved more into dance. And dance is incredible, and it's something that everybody needs as well, you know, to move your body and move around that chi and that energy. However, being able to articulate myself properly and being like you say, appreciated for what was in my mind, my thoughts and my thought process, which can sometimes be a complete scatter. But you know, when I then go and perform my piece on stage and people are laughing and whatever, it's a really beautiful thing. And also where I come from, and I still feel like this actually, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I've kind of gone 360 in my head about it. Where I come from, sometimes talking isn't the best thing. You know, you don't talk about certain things.
Yeah.
And, and I've learned to hush that side of me a little bit and be a little bit more expressive. However, maybe it's because it's ingrained in me, but I'm also okay with the fact that I don't always want to talk about certain things, and I don't think everything does need talking about. However, I can write it down and I can get rid of it and move on.
And everyone's different, and you know, you're a healthy individual who's worked out the process that works for you to handle your own emotions and your thought process.
So it's a broader concept, not just of speech, but of communication.
Yeah,
and in particular, emotional communication
with yourself as well. Just understanding who you are and how you process things, and because everyone's different, of course. Yeah, you just got to find that thing. And also, I must admit as well, I have had CBT therapy, and so that really does help one get in touch with your mind.
Yeah. So therapy helped you, gave you a set of tools and skills. How about yourself? Did you have some therapy as well?
I haven't ever had therapy, no. I guess for me, I haven't had therapy. My friends and exercise is my sort of what I do for my personal therapy to keep myself feeling all right.
Yeah.
And I would like to add in your family as well.
Yeah. But when it comes to art, I think it's a really great thing, a great basis for communication and connection, whether it's spoken word or any other artistic discipline. We both met at Chicken Shed Theatre Company, which is inclusive theatre in North London, and it was their practice that inspired a lot of the work we do. And they use art, and it's all about creating art, but the real value in it is not just the art they create, it's the home that is built for everyone within that community, and the connections that are built, and the space that they create for all those people to come together and be a community. You can do that through art in lots of different ways. And I've seen, and the impact of spoken word has been really hard to describe. Some of the we've had so many moments over these last few years where we've seen it very clearly change a young person's life from participating in just one or a couple of workshops. You can literally see, and because I've been through that myself in a way at a later stage to most of these people we're working with, but you can literally see the change in some of these young. They'll come up to me and say, I didn't know I had a passion. I didn't know, like literally, I didn't know that anyone would listen to me. And now I feel like I have the right to speak. And now I feel like I deserve to speak.
And to add to that, obviously, it's beautiful when a young person says such things to you. It's equally as beautiful when an adult comes up to you and says the same thing. Somebody who's gone through someone who may be older than us, or a similar age, and they haven't been able to express themselves this whole time, and either through a workshop or and coming to an event and getting up on stage and actually speaking their mind, the rush that they get from it is just incredible. And seeing these people who have gone through 40, 50, 60 years of life just open up all of a sudden is incredible.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's wonderful. The sort of transformative power of the arts is well known. It's well recorded.
And that's not just us, it's every poetry. I was about to say spoken word and poetry all at the same time. It's every spoken word organization that's out there doing this and holding these spaces for people who need it. It's incredible.
It's beautiful. At pretty much every one of our events, there'll be a handful of people, at least a few people, who are performing spoken word for the first time in front of an audience. Yeah. And every time someone does that, it is a transformational process. You're terrified, as I experienced when I did it for the first time, and you come off stage with this massive thing of relief, and then there's this revelation when you're appreciated for what you've said. And also, so
it's the space, and it's also the people that are in the space. For example, I decided on a whim, because I was in the area, I think it was at the beginning of mid-April, I was in Birmingham, because I live up in the West Mids, and I was in Birmingham for a reason. And I decided that while I was there, I was going to see if there was any spoken word events happening. And I looked on Eventbrite and I found one called the Blank Canvas Society. Check them out if you've never heard of them. The Blank Canvas Society. And I went by myself, and I'm a fairly confident person, but I still get nervous, of course, we all do. And I went to this event by myself, not knowing what to expect. And the warmth that I got and the receptiveness that I got from a completely new crowd of people was just incredible. And I was like, wow, yeah, these spaces are incredible and there needs to be more of them.
I mean, what's interesting to me is that, you know, there are very few transcultural, transhistorical human experiences in mental health or illness or in general. Very much things are time specific and culture specific. And that's, you know, including things like gender identity, etc. These things are largely constructs. But what's interesting is that the arts is one of the, as a collection, but also as individual things, are one of those few events or things that are transcultural, transhistorical. They've always been invented by human cultures, no matter when. And in fact, in many ways, you can define the beginnings of human culture because you see these pictures. And in fact, one of the earliest art forms that records the beginning of human culture is decorating graves, for example, oddly enough. So if you talk to anthropologists, you'll say, they'll tell you. And also the arts are inherently healthy. There's some literature that tries to pathologize arts and artists, but all the research evidence seems to indicate that they are inherently healthy as activities, psychologically inherently healthy activities.
In the same way that I think probably most sporting activities or any community activity with a center focus where you're all collectively working towards a shared goal.
When you can get groups of people together in a safe way, working on a mutual project, that's always a sort of really, really good thing. In fact, in a lot of the NHS sort of psychological therapies approaches, these groups, they call them peer support groups, things like that. They're right at the sort of at the leading edge at the moment. They're sort of discovering just how valuable they are in terms of dealing with long-term conditions. Because one of the things, and when I come back to some of the earlier stuff you said about, I'm not going to use the word pandemic, it's been overused in our lives. I never want to hear that word again. There's a lot of anxiety and fear amongst kids and young people at the moment. At sort of at very, very significant numbers are experiencing it.
Which actually leads me on to the question I wanted to ask you, Noel, which is, what is your opinion on how we tackle this epidemic of mental health issues among young people?
Well, to be honest, I mean, I did a show just before or during the pandemic, and somebody was asking that question, saying, well, how are we going to deal with this? We know there's going to be a significant amount of psychological distress coming out of him. One of the things I immediately said was that we need to train more people in the arts.
Well, and
not in psychology, not in psychotherapy, not in counselling. We just need to give people permission to do the arts much more, because they're naturally healing.
How do we kind of cross over so that we can have the best practice possible with the arts and the mental health sectors? Because a lot of the work we're doing and a lot of the projects we've been involved in, and often they're pilot projects, but they're all about arts-based engagement as early intervention and as prevention.
It's really interesting. I mean, I think it is interesting, but very briefly, there are mental health practitioners who have job titles like music therapist or art therapist or psychotherapist or counsellor or psychologist, etc. And these are highly specialised people that can do highly specialised work. I don't think we could do with more of those. Why not? But I don't think really that's what it's about in terms of the way I think about it. And again, I was asked this question about the earthquake in Turkey not long ago. The assumption was that you're going to have loads of highly specialized mental health professionals who know all about EMDR, and you're going to fly them in, parachute them in, and sort out the PTSD. Well, it's not realistic. That's not going to happen, and it's not necessary. But the highly specialized person, if they are comfortable enough in their own skin, doesn't need to deliver the therapy. They need to support the people doing the work, which is the more general health and well-being work. Actually, my experience of the arts are that when you put them into health settings, you don't really want therapists doing it. Sorry,
to
get into a lot of trouble saying things like that.
It is more regimented when it's like that, whereas people who are highly creative and artistic have a different way of working.
And I saw an example of that firsthand when I was working in a low-tier CAMS unit. And they had a music therapist who'd been working with these young people for months every week and had made no progress. And the young people did not engage with this person at all, even though they were a professional music therapist. And I was employed as a teaching assistant, but I was actually doing poetry and drama exercises with these young people. And there was sudden progress in all these young people that had been really, really not getting anywhere. And they were engaging with me much better than they were with this professional trained therapist. And as a young man and an artist and an educator, I found it very frustrating being in a clinical setting where there were people, like, it was very evident that whatever I was doing was working better than what they'd been doing, but they were not willing to consider looking at what I was doing or consider.
I mean, it's a familiar story to me, and I have to be careful because I might get targeted by lots of angry music therapists and drama therapists. I put my hand up. I am a drama therapist. but I am a drama therapist. I've done this work in hospitals, etc., etc., etc. So I'm not dissing the profession at all. I think it's of tremendous use and value. But I think that there's also a need to look at how we might utilize people with those skills so that they can facilitate and support the broader work, because mental illness is one thing and you might want treatment for mental illness, and that's really valuable. I absolutely 100% do agree with that. And if you're having somebody treating mental illness, they definitely should have the appropriate qualifications and experience, right? And it should be somebody who is well qualified, well experienced, and accountable for their practice.
Sure.
So they are conscious about what they're doing and why they're doing and what they expect as the outcomes. When they don't get those outcomes, they need to be able to be held to account for it.
When it comes to prevention,
but that's treating mental illness, right? But mental health is not the same as the absence of mental illness.
Just
isn't. Mental health is a much broader, complex, holistic understanding of what a human being needs. Because my experience is, this is clinically my experience, is that you can be really good at treating somebody's illness, but their life is still pretty empty, meaningless. So what's the point?
And
it's like that old medical model. We give you a pill that takes away the symptoms, but what are you doing then?
You've got to look at the cause.
Yes, and then there's, I mean, obviously, maybe to us and to the people that are listening and watching, there needs to be, in nearly all cases in the medical field, there needs to be a more holistic approach to all of these things, but especially mental health. I mean, look at people who are singing and dancing at parties. They are like, it's the freest that they are. And they don't have to be dancers or they don't have to be singers, but just them being able to express themselves with movement and song. I mean, I don't see people happier usually than people that are dancing and having a good time. And so, you know, of course, people need to talk, people need to write, people need to move their bodies to be able to move their minds. And I think they all go hand. People need to feed their bodies correctly as well, so that their minds and their bodies work correctly. I think there's like 5, 6, maybe 7 things that all go hand in hand to,
and many more,
and many more. I'm sure.
But I mean, I think it's just important to understand that, say, a music therapist is doing a different task to a musician. Just to understand that. And I think in terms of clinical settings, that's often misunderstood, that when you talk about the mental health benefits of music, that in clinical settings gets misunderstood as, oh, we need a music therapist. You don't. You might need a music therapist. You're not going to hurt you.
You might just need that person to be involved in some music activity.
To make it.
Yeah, but you know, it's giving access to these meaningful healthy activities, if you like.
And so we've got an idea, which is an idea that I know is shared by a lot of sort of practitioners and mental health professionals that we've spoken to, and we're, you know, trying to get it all its way into Parliament. But that is to have a sort of a preventative early intervention system, by where in every borough or every health system, if you as a young person call up and say, I'm having some trouble with my mental health, and you're not kind of ill enough to get referred to CAMS, you are given an offer of participating in a range of creative workshops. And
we've begun to see that, and it's called social prescribing. which is already happening, and GPs can do it. And at the moment, they're prescribing. The ones that sign up for it are prescribing around a narrow set of things like going on walking groups and things like that, because it's obviously healthy. And I think we will see the expansion of that. So I think that's correct. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And the NICE guidelines, these are the professional guidelines that determine treatment interventions, are beginning to see more and more of these social prescribing
What
things.
would be really nice would be, sorry to cut you, to have a mental health professional overseeing a group of artists. So,
well, I mean, I think that's an interesting model, and it's not new, and it's one that I've worked with. I've worked in teams like that, and there's an inherent risk in those things of the professionals taking over, if you like, the clinicians taking over and infecting the process.
That would definitely ruin it. I think
it's a real problem.
In my idea, it would run on the basis that the artist is left to autonomously run their workshops and deliver their work, as obviously they're hired on the basis that they are of a certain level and they can be held accountable for their work, DBS checked, of course, etc., etc.
And there used to be a lot of projects like that. I worked on one in Edinburgh when I first started my practice. It was a joint project of arts therapists and artists and psychotherapists and artists.
And the artists would be able to, if they needed support, then go to someone with the mental health experience to say, hey, how should I best handle this? And they'd work together to find a solution.
It's not a hierarchical situation.
And find best practice by collaboration.
That's it.
Well, and again, the models for that exist. They're called MDTs, multidisciplinary
teams.
And so again, those models exist, but I think the reality is we have a health service which has been decimated for 13 years. So we have to there's a political reality check here that's, we've got nurses going on strike because they haven't had a wage increase for 10 years, right? We've got doctors going on strike.
And if you think about the people who choose to become nurses, if those people are having to not go in and save the people they want to look after because they're being treated so badly and people aren't listening,
what the hell is going on?
And it's also, it may not be an appropriate place to deliver via that type of health system structures anyway. And there are inherent issues around health funding and how most of the lion's share of the money goes towards treatment rather than prevention. And it's beginning to rebalance, I think, and I'm not an expert on health funding, but that's more of a lay opinion than anything else. So in terms of
relevant though,
but you make more money from treatment than prevention as well, don't you?
I mean, it's like if you're in America, that's absolutely true. And they have they have an illness service, not a health service, because there's more profit in illness. That's not necessarily true in the UK and in Europe because there's a different model, but it's more the politics of who holds budgets, and the people who hold budgets are consultants. And in fact, your dad will know more about this, given that he was one of those. So consultants have money and they like to hold on to their money, and they like to hold on to their teams and things like that. So, I mean, there is a need to rethink all of these things. But coming back to the question, how do we deal with these problems? Now, I think it's really interesting. And if we look at some of the things that are happening in schools, so CAMS is struggling, for people who don't know, Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, has been struggling for a long time. It struggled long before the pandemic, got far worse in the pandemic, and the what do they call the entry point that the whatever it's called, that's not the correct
term. For building before I can get treatments.
Yeah, it's that thing. There's a word for it, but I can't remember. Now, what's happened, and I have to say this is a really great move, is that rather than try and sort out CAMS and have a lot more mental health nurses in and a lot more psychologists, which are very expensive, and it takes the agenda for change, recognise it would take 5 to 10 years to get those people in. They went a different model with the schools, and they produced support services around each school, which are looking at health and well-being in a more general sense. And the way to think about it, the way I think about it, is I think about the project, which is now called NHS Talking Therapies, but used to be called IAPT. And IAPT was a way of training people in a set of core what were cognitive behavioral therapy skills without giving them a full several years of psychotherapy training. And it was a very targeted training program that was very targeted, dealing with the more general mental health problems that the population have. And to date, they've treated 6.5 million people, which is fantastic. And they haven't needed to train them to sort of postdoctoral level as psychologists. It's just sort of, they got nurses, podiatrists, or anybody who wanted to was allowed to go and do this core training in IAP to be either a low intensity or high intensity. Now, those types of models, I think, are really sensible.
Yeah. To give someone that base, it doesn't matter, what your actual profession is. If you have a base level of understanding of people and communication and stuff, then it kind of makes every other job that you do easier. I mean, loads of people have first aid training. Great.
I think it's that type of model. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And we need to do that. I believe we need to do that more in terms of mental health, not necessarily mental health first aid, which is a signposting service, but looking at how we roll out and equip people to be more psychologically astute and to be able to intervene, and teaching people about psychologically healthy behaviors, such as the fantastic work you guys are doing.
With a really good artist or a really good facilitator, they are doing that all the time, and they're taking into consideration the well-being and the mental state of every person in the room without making it obvious. They're observing and
I think what the highly technical specialist like me needs to be doing in situations like this is understanding that what you guys do is good enough as it is, and it doesn't need to be messed about with. But it's like you say, in clinical settings, it just needs to be safe. And that's what the professional like me should be doing, is just making sure it's safe, that the systems are in place in case something comes up and somebody starts to feel like hurting themselves, for example, so that there's good communication and signaling around that sort of stuff. But otherwise, it's about just facilitating you to do the work. That's literally it. Because these activities are inherently healthy activities. And I want to keep saying that to people, that get involved in the arts, get involved in what you guys are doing, join an Amdram group, learn to sing, join a choir, learn to dance,
go to
etc. Do all this stuff, and you're quids in terms of your psychological health and well-being. You really are quids in. It's a brilliant thing.
And your general life satisfaction and happiness and motivation.
In our day and age as well, a lot of people are quite sedentary as well, and just being able to, like I said before, like move your body, get some energy. It does wonders.
Move your mind,
move your body to move your mind. So
when you're pushing an open door with me, I'm sorry, I got in a bit of a soapbox. I'll stop there. We're running out of time, folks, but it's always like this. But I want to make sure that you get your plugs in for the various groups and how people can get hold of you. So first of all, is there a dreaded website that people can get hold of you?
www.write2speak.co.uk, and Write2Speak is WRITE, the number 2 speak. Write2speak.co.uk is our website. We're also on Instagram. Right. We actually have 2 Instagram accounts now. One which is more focused on our live performance and event work, and one which is more focused on education, but there's some crossover.
And actually a third one, which will slowly be forming over the next few years, Write2Move as well. Keeping out for that.
Write2Move. Tell me the names of all 3 of them. Write2Move.
Already? Yeah. So Write2Move UK, Write2Speak UK, and Write2Speak.education.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
And we run a monthly spoken word event at the Queen's Arms in Barnet, which is the 3rd Wednesday of every month from 7 p.m. till 10 p.m. And you can find out all the information and book a ticket for that via our website.
Still called the Queen's Arms. Somebody need to point something out to them. Clearly saying. All right, so say that again. It's in Barnet.
In Barnet, in North London, on the 3rd Wednesday of every month at the Queen's Arms, and you can find all those details through our website or through our Instagram.
And so is the website the best way if people want to book you, for example? Is that the best way to get hold of you?
Yes, or you can email us, which is just info@write2speak.co.uk.
Right.
And our main Instagram account is Write2Speak UK. So that's where you can find out about all the events.
Great. And the main focus of your work, I guess, I mean, you have this monthly event, but you're actually workshoppers, aren't you? You go into schools and all sorts of settings. Tell me about the types of settings that you work in.
We work in all settings from primary school with children of age 7 and 8 upwards. We work in secondary schools, colleges, universities, and with charities and youth groups and with adult groups as well.
Right.
We also work with groups that are facing certain challenges, marginalized groups, people that may struggle to participate in society in some ways. We can create tailored workshops to those groups.
We've worked with local councils as well to facilitate workshops for target groups that they'd like to work with.
And you know that famous sort of little anecdote about Winston Churchill, don't you? When his Minister for the Arts during WW2 came up to him and said, you know, we need to close down the theatres and the galleries. We can't afford to keep them open anymore. We have to take their money away and build tanks with it. He said, if you do that, why would we bother fighting?
There we go.
Seriously, he was right. I mean, there's a lot he was wrong about. But
I was going to say, yeah, something he got right.
Yeah, you know, that's the truth here.
And the truth is also that no one is one layered, right?
Yeah,
everyone's multi-layered.
Absolutely. As an Irishman, I've got complications around that bloke, but there you go. But we're inclusive. Look, it's been fantastic to have you both on, and we will bring you back again to talk about these things again. It's the work you're doing is hugely significant, and if from the last time we talked, it seems to have grown again, which is good. I'm glad to hear that it's growing. So
hopefully we can collaborate in the future on creating support systems.
Absolutely. So you folks stay there. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody else. I cannot remember who we've got on next week, but I never do remember. So that's not unusual. That's not because they're not very good. They're going to be brilliant, but it's just me. I never know. James will be laughing his head off at me. Maybe it's Benjamin Zephaniah now that I've just alive. Well, I'll reach out.
I feel like we need to apologise to Benjamin Zephaniah.
I do.
That, like weird beginning to the show.
Benji, I'm so sorry, mate. He's like a total hero of mine.
Get us on the next Life and Rhymes show, if you're watching.
Bring him on. Who knows? Lovely to see you all. See you all next week. You guys.
Thanks for your time.
Bye-bye.